My name is Kelsey Maher, and I am the eCom Sales Manager for North America and uh, Australia and New Zealand. And today we're also joined by Scott. Scott is the owner of award-winning cafes in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, along with his wholesale roastery, Carrboro Coffee Roasters. Scott has had many opportunities to travel and teach and learn about coffee production, process, selection, roasting, retail, and quality trends for the last 25 years. Through his roastery's Farmer Direct relationship program, he travels frequently to support their farmer partners around the world. He is an active educator in the industry in most all disciplines and consults for cafes and businesses nationally and around the world for technical skill, knowledge, and competition. He serves as a World Coffee Events representative and certified head judge for World Coffee Championships for the last 19 years, and is also an instructor for the WCE Judge Certification Program. Scott sits on multiple WCE and SCA committees and has been an active member of the CQI Coffee Corps. Phew, a lot of letters right there. He has been involved in the Cup of Excellence program since 2007 and a head judge since 2015, and is an instructor for the Alliance for Coffee Excellence, ACE, education programs such as the Sensory Education Training, SET. Thank you for joining us today, Scott.
Thank you. Sorry about all the acronyms.
Oh, no problem. It's very impressive. It's great. We're also going to be joined a little later today by Matthew. And Matthew, just a little bit about him. He started out in the coffee industry in 2009, co-founding a small chain of specialty coffee houses in Brighton on the UK's South Coast. Wanting to get more intimate with the product and expand his knowledge of the supply chain, he started roasting in 2014. After honing his skills on various roasting systems, he began consulting and training with roasting businesses and coffee houses around London and the Southeast. Most recently, Matthew founded Plot Roasting in 2019, specializing in single origin micro lot coffees sourced through quality focused producers with an emphasis on building long-term purchasing relationships. So as we mentioned, as we were waiting today, Matthew will be joining us a little bit later on. So we're going to just move ahead, and when he pops in, we'll go back, maybe revisit a few questions just to get his insight. Otherwise, we'll just continue moving forward. Does that sound all right, Scott?
Sounds good.
Cool. So to begin with, let's talk about getting started. So what initially inspired you, Scott, to build out a wholesale program?
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the points where it's interesting to compare to Matthew's experience, but because I feel like mine's fairly unique, and I'm happy to be shown I'm wrong, but I got into this in a way that I think a lot of people do, which is from the retail side, but I did it simultaneously building the wholesale sort of in the background, and the idea being that I really wanted to find a better way, a new paradigm for how we sort of did coffee, and that's everything from sourcing it to roasting it and transferring it to clients. But that big part really was the part that needed to be the most shaken up was the part of how do we source coffee? What are we paying for coffee? And so I dove into the retail because it was the easier, it sounds crazy, but it was the easier place to start while I was developing the portions of the wholesale that would be different. And so this, I guess, why did I get into it is the answer is I wanted to do something different. I wanted to try to do it better. And I wanted to be available as a template for folks if it worked, and at this point we know it did decades later, but so people could look to it and say, oh, it's possible to do it differently. It's possible to do it this way. and still be successful and still be a well-run company, not just, we're not a nonprofit, even though there were years where it felt like we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what did you notice since you started with retail, the differences between your retail business versus your wholesale business as you started building out that wholesale side?
Yeah, I think every area is going to be a little different. In our communities, it was actually kind of fortunate that we paved the way with the retail, because there was such a need for education. There was such a need for building that initial foundation of knowledge and understanding of what coffee can and should be. Our area was definitely behind the curve a little bit of understanding what quality can and should be. And so the retail allowed us to sort of have that conversation right away and early on, and sort of be able to back into what we were going to do and what we eventually did with the wholesale side, and then integrated the two, and then we're able to expand that conversation beyond just the drink that they're getting. So we started with talking about that point of contact beverage that's being handed off, and then slowly worked back towards where did that beverage come from? How did the pieces come together? Where did the coffee come from? And really basically segued into the wholesale side of it. So it all became one conversation eventually, but it took time to sort of put the pieces together because of the audience that we were working with.
Yeah, can you just give us a few examples of how people received that education? I grew up in a very similar area where Scott is currently based, and I have talked to coffee roasters there, and I know they've changed their strategy based on the education curve seemed too high for certain areas.
Yeah, and it was a struggle. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not like it didn't happen overnight. It took years, but my premise was, this is how we're going to do it. It will either work or it won't work. There's only one way I want it to happen, and if it doesn't work, it's fine. We tried, and so it really just became a matter of finding different ways to connect with people and finding what was important to them, and how to use that conversation to show them what could be better in our industry. So an example that I think is probably the earliest one we had was, we had the town police come in, who were nice enough to want to buy coffee from us, but we're not interested in where it came from. Like they were just not high on their list. But every time we handed it to them, remember, this is the late 90s, we would tell them where it came from. And whether they cared or not, we would tell them, and we would give them a little bit of information in 10 seconds, and they'd be on their way. Well, over time, they found out subliminally that they did care. And when there was more than one option, they said, oh, I like that one and not this one better. And we're like, aha, you are learning that there is a difference, and that was a very fundamental sort of first step for some of them.
That's pretty awesome. That repeated reminder. That's awesome.
And then we just take that same sort of idea, expand upon it, find different ways of doing it, and utilize it in wholesale as well, and tie them together.
That makes sense. Well, that's a good segue of how did you find those first initial clients for wholesale?
And again, there's a little bit of what we did that was definitely based on it being 2 decades ago, but some of it still translates to today. And I think one of the big ones that translates is volunteerism. A lot of what opportunities there were beyond some of the classes you could take it through the SCA, then the SCAA, were sort of finite. That was that you took classes and that was it. You got a certificate or whatever. And really, if you wanted to learn more and wanted to get more in depth, you either volunteered and sort of dug into whatever the work you were doing, or maybe you got a job and they taught you on the job how to do a thing. And so for me, it was I want to know more about basically what's going on in each country, and volunteered through this is part of the CQI program, the Coffee Corps, where they had different USAID funded programs. And I would just volunteer for them, as on some level of an expertise, and then just immersion, just learning so much. And so I started to meet people, and I'd learn things, and really start learning. I'd be introduced to coffees I'd never seen before, all that fun stuff where you start developing what we really wanted to do to change our industry, which was build relationships.
Mm.
And 20 years ago, this was a novel concept. Like, we've all heard this word used a lot now, but it was something different, and I thought fundamentally important to basically have a conversation with the people doing the work, not someone who's buying it from them. And so I'm on the ground doing that. And now I'll sometimes meet a coffee first, sometimes I meet a farmer first. Ideally, I'll meet them at the same time, but it doesn't always happen. And so that's sort of how these relationships start. It's never just about the coffee, although clearly the coffee is important. That we are able to start them and sustain these relationships over time.
And so what I'm hearing is, like, through the volunteering, you were able to meet the farmers or meet the coffee. And then from that experience, you were able to weave a narrative that you would then tell potential clients, and have that like multiple touch narrative that you're telling folks for the education building to build clients.
Yeah, because it was important to not have it just be a photo op. I think you see some of that now, and it's a little sad that that was the start.
Mm-hmm.
The sustaining part of it was continuing to visit, continuing to meet and talk, continuing to figure out what a long-term plan looks like, not just a single purchase. Like, those are the things that became part of our conversation, both with the producers and then bringing that conversation and information back to wholesale clients and consumers, and basically saying, here's the transparency. Like, we're trying to create this conduit of information that allows you to learn as much as you want, and everyone's going to be a little different about how much they want to learn, and in whatever time frame you want to learn it in. So we're not forcing it all on you at once, because it can be overwhelming. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And so after building these relationships and getting an amazing product line, I talk to wholesale folks day in and day out, managers, wholesale managers, and operation managers, about their clientele. So I've seen bakeries as groups of clients. I've seen all the way down to like airports for some folks. If we're starting out a wholesale business, where do we originally like meet those first few customers?
I think you're right. I think a lot of folks start with sort of a targeted list, and a lot of them are the usual suspects. Like, clearly you'd want to sell to a cafe. Clearly you would sell to a restaurant. These are all known quantities. Then you get into the newer and way more utilized currently avenues of like markets, like grocery, that have become so much more prominent lately with the pandemic. But there are a lot of different avenues, and I think you mentioned one that is now just taking off again, airports, whereas we were all sort of just we dealt with the lowest common denominator at an airport because that's what was happening. And I think even airports are now understanding, like, they can't, if they want something better, they can't tie the hands of the people who are wanting to get in there. But we've even saw, not that they're necessarily game changers in the sense of volume, but unique avenues. For us, it was hair salons. We realized, we had one outreach, and then suddenly it was like, oh wait, people wait there for a long time, and they want coffee. Yeah. So, and they're already spending what, $75, $150 on whatever, and so a nice cup of coffee is makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. And I know when we had talked to Matthew, he had mentioned going to trade shows like Coffee Fest to meet folks. Do you do that at Carrboro Coffee?
Not as direct as he does. I think he was mentioning that he definitely sets up like a booth or finds a way to find customers, at least in his region. I can't remember if he's doing them nationally or internationally, but definitely like the London Coffee show and stuff like that for him. And we haven't really done that. We've grown pretty organically without it. I think it is a potential for folks to utilize. I think it's a potentially a good one. It sort of just has to fit your business model and your growth plans.
Mhm.
It is just maybe like a couple steps up from cold calling, excuse me, and still a sort of a shotgun effect in the way that you're just sort of like, here we are, let's talk to everybody.
Mhm.
But clearly it works. People keep doing it. And it can be a way to attract attention.
I think another interesting strategy Matthew had mentioned, and when he pops on, I think we should circle back to it, was the use of Instagram as a way to find clients. And from my understanding, it sounded like he was that was a large part of his initial strategy of directly contacting potential customers as another way to find different avenues of sales.
Yeah, I would love to have him talk more about that. That's not my, I don't have a knowledge of that one. We use it as marketing, but definitely not business development. So I'd love to hear some more about that from him.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. So as you're building out your wholesale line, how does that differ from any retail products you might offer? Like if I'm developing my offerings, what should I consider?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to look at that. I think so. So I have 3 retail locations now, and in many ways, well, they all have their own personality, right? So they're all a little different on purpose, and in some ways that they become the proof of principle, right? So they've all been around for a long time,
Mhm.
for decades. So there's that. We can show proof of knowledge of how to be successful, but we can also show proof of principle from an equipment perspective. What works, what doesn't work in different volume settings. But then product line, we try to have a range. We have anywhere from 25 to 30 different offerings at a time, which is plenty to create something unique for a different establishment. No one establishment's carrying all those coffees at the same time. That would be crazy. But they are all available. And so I think that one of the things that people can do is, or what we do is create a wide enough range and wide enough diversity for people to find what might work for them. And even what might work for them might change over time. And that's fine too. We already know there's a potential change in what's available just due to harvest. So even within that, people might want to change seasonally or for some other reason. But we really, as long as you have a range, even from an equipment standpoint, as long as you have a range of offerings, whether it's the way people want to brew coffee, maybe they have an idea of a specific equipment that they like, or it can be just as simple as economics, that they need a range in affordability, but that would still get the job done. Those are the kinds of things we think about. So we have a similar range in product as well, but all being, sort of focused on our farmer direct relationship model, so that they are getting unique coffees that they can't get anywhere else.
So when we just to like dive a little bit deeper, when we talk about range, so like a range in coffees might be blends where you can maybe make it a little bit more affordable to some special single origins. Is that correct? And then maybe another range could be, are you offering 12-ounce or smaller size bags, but maybe in cases all the way up to like 5 pounds? What is that range?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're hitting all the right things. So there's two things there. I'll start with the last one first. The idea of having volume ranges, and having sort of wholesale bulk prices based on that, because it's considering the labor costs and that kind of thing too. We've never done the 12-ounce except when we had to. There's certain companies that won't be named that required 12 ounces, but our mantra has always been buy less more often, right? So we've always pushed the 8-ounce bag because it seems to be real time use, before you would sort of say, oh, this coffee's too old. and if you needed a pound, you just buy two, that kind of thing. So, but we do have 4 ounce, for either higher end or expensive coffees, or just, limited need, all the way up to 5 pound, bulk basically is what is standard, for our industry. And when it comes to coffees, we do have a few blends. We really try to have a blend for a reason. I think that there's a lot of, there can be good reasons to blend coffee. Let's put it that way. And one of them is, for us, is specific, consistent profiles that we can have year round, regardless of maybe harvest changes. And so, we really only have 4, and those are the ones we can utilize going forward. But we will do specific ones for clients if that's something that they're interested in. They want to put the work in, we're happy to as well, and get some form of proprietary experience out of it, sometimes labeled specifically for them, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. And just thinking, kind of, we have our blends, we have our single origins, and then also the 8 ounce bags, it sounds like, and the 5 pound. What kind of client buys like an 8 ounce bag versus a 5 pound bag if I'm trying to utilize my resources that may be limited if I'm just starting, or maybe I'm doing a pre-roast blend because I might try to keep costs down originally and then go into more single origin options?
Yeah, I think that, so the bulk, again, just from the labor perspective, that's going to be the most cost effective is the larger volumes. And most people start with that because their goal is beverage preparation, right? So you just need coffee so that you can make coffee. The retail bags would come in as sort of an ancillary purchase. It's sort of like your grab and go at the counter sort of scenario, where you're thinking about attracting people's attention with bags, that are hopefully ones that will attract their attention. And we try to balance ours with information as well, just to sort of make it enough and not too much to get them, on board with what we're trying to do from an educational standpoint, but make it inviting. And that's where we found that really, when you're making coffee and when you're selling it to folks, in many ways, it's kind of like sampling. Sure, they're purchasing it, but they're trying it, and in that moment, they might the light bulb might click in their head, and they're like, "Oh, this is great. I would love this at home." And this is where retail bags come in. And if they're right there and ready to go, you've maybe just added a sale that you wouldn't have had if you didn't have the bag. So while you could wait if you're someone who's just starting out, I wouldn't wait too long, because it's really going to help propel you into revenue generation.
And continue to build your brand, right?
Right, exactly. Because that brand goes home, somebody else sees it, maybe they share it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in our previous conversations, one of the things I was surprised about, like, I knew people add coffee, I see people adding allied products like cups and sleeves and syrup sometimes. What I thought was really interesting was the equipment that sometimes comes along with wholesale clients. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think I mentioned last time that a lot of folks look at wholesale roasteries as one-stop shopping, or they want them to be at the very least, and that's completely understandable. But no one wants to have to deal with multiple venues if they don't have to. And then it just becomes sort of up to the wholesaler to decide what are you capable of, what are you interested in, where is your line personally about what you are going to carry, and what can you carry. We draw the line at some of the things that for some reason we just don't have space for. There's real minimums involved in some of these things that can be warehouse size minimums, and if you don't have a warehouse, you're not going to be the in-between for these things. And so that becomes part of the conversation. What can you store, but also what can you manage, and do you have a system for managing all of these extra things? We try to keep it pretty tight to more coffee focused things, and or have enough of something to be an emergency support for our clients, which is really the main thing. Is we want to be a support system for our wholesale clients. Not necessarily the go-to for everything, but we can help out. when needed. And so I always tell folks like, yeah, we have cups, but we're not a paper company. You may not
Mhm.
want to buy them through us unless you have to, that's not what we do for a living, and I think to your point about equipment, we had that conversation about we are not equipment manufacturers. We're not necessarily equipment people, but we have to be, or we don't get coffee. So we're luckily very interested in the equipment and the mechanical side of things, but it's not a given for everybody, and it's not necessarily something everybody should try to take on.
Right. So when you do add a piece of equipment for a client, are you then also the technician, or do you kind of try to say, that's not our role? We roast coffee and provide you with coffee. We can teach you like how to brew it.
I think we've always tried to be that we picked that one as the one we want to support our clients with, as opposed to some of the other ancillary items. And so we realized if we're going to do this, we're going to supply, we want to be a full support. And so that would be, we're going to do the warranty, technical support work. We're going to, do any of the follow-up that's necessary. We do the install, we do the training.
Okay.
We felt like those were the lines we were comfortable with and being in control of.
At least on the like on your side, like training wise, does that mean who on your team is trained then with technical support for that kind of help?
We have a pretty small company. Like we were 12 pre-pandemic, we're 8 now. We're trying to build back like everybody. And we have designated people, but there's multiple people. We have a lot of overlap on purpose. I get a lot of small companies are like that, where there might be one main person, but there's a couple of auxiliary people who can do the work as well. And that's true for technical, because there's a real truth in the repair world that everything's fine until suddenly it isn't, and it seems to all happen at the same time. So having more than one person being able to fix things can become important.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I can just imagine what a disaster that would be.
Yeah, but we've always again we've wanted to be that support system and create a relationship with our clients that is similar to, if not exactly the same as, the relationships we're building at the farm level. So what we're trying to do is not create a dependency, but show them that we have their back for their project, their basically passion of what they're building.
So what are some boundaries that you draw for your wholesale program of like, maybe this is not necessarily a service we can offer for you. We can fix the machine, but maybe we can't do this.
Yeah, with equipment, there really isn't much, because we took it on purposely, and we wouldn't sell something to them. So I think maybe the only line is we're willing to work with folks who want to buy equipment on their own and not through us. Clearly, it's not warranted or whatever, but we'll do our best to work on it. If it's a product that we don't cover, which is pretty rare, but if it's some random company manufacturer that we don't necessarily know anything about, we can make a good faith effort, but that might be where we say, hey, you need to find somebody who actually knows this equipment, because we don't want to mess anything up. So sometimes that'll happen, but for the most part, for us, it's the ancillary products that we're sort of stepping away from and saying, yeah, we're not going to be your paper supplier, we're not going to be your syrup supplier, or you can find your alternative milk somewhere else. Can we get them to you in an emergency? Absolutely. Do you want to buy from us on a regular basis? Probably not.
Yeah. I like that as a way to make your services pretty unique. And so what would you say are some of like the initial costs and tools that you've used to build out your wholesale program? I see pictures of the van here.
Yeah, and that van, 1987 Vanagon hardtop, for those who are into VWs, is still running now for events. So it used to be our delivery vehicle many years ago, and we've since had to expand, which is, to your point, one of the things you have to consider. Especially if you are offering delivery, which it's hard not to at this point. Although you can certainly ship things, but there's a whole cost involved there that you have to figure out. And so the infrastructure for both internally developing delivery and then obviously externally getting it to the customer is something you have to consider. And then not only is it the upfront cost, it's the maintenance of that vehicle or vehicles to be able to keep them running, because you can't tell people they can't have their coffee because your van doesn't work. You have to get it to them. They're not interested in hearing that.
That's when you need to take the big bicycle off the building and start pedaling.
Right now, it might go faster than the van. And so, but if going internal, then you've got all the sort of usual suspects of what roaster are you using, how are you installing it, what are the costs for that, and then what are your local municipality sort of requirements for installing that are huge, and really need to be figured out before you take those next steps, because they can set you back or even cause you to have to redo things and spend more money than you had initially thought. And then there's just that equipment list of what you need in order to run a wholesale roastery, or even just a roastery, if it's for yourself, from the sealers, and if you want to do automation, weigh-in fills and packers, and certainly grinders if you're having ground coffee going out the door, scales and all the fun stuff. But really a lot of it is infrastructure. From my experience, a lot of it is infrastructure build out to build the space to your specifications for how your operational flow is going to be internally, and that is a large chunk of what you need.
Yeah, I know we had originally discussed like, oh, well, you need this very similar tools to building out a retail roastery and a wholesale roastery. I guess one of my questions would be, if I'm just starting out, like I'm kind of in the ideation phase, would you recommend getting a larger roaster if I'm doing roasting larger volumes, or would you say, no, stick to the small one or the smaller sizes? What would be your suggestion?
Well, as you can imagine, there's no one answer to that. It's very specific to the situation and the goals of whoever you're talking to. Their goals of where they want to be a year from now, 5 years from now, will sort of determine what direction they might want to go in. In very general terms, I'm a fan of redundancy. When people want to go from a 15 kilo to a 30 kilo, I'm always like, maybe you want 2 15 kilos, because we know that things happen. And something as simple as a roaster break that doesn't get fixed in a day can really put you out. And so there's some, things to consider. And obviously when I'm saying that, I have to consider, do they have a space for 2 15 kilo roasters? So there's a lot of different caveats to that. But, generally what we see are the people who are starting out with a tabletop roaster or something, in their home or in the garage, and they're trying to figure out, how do I scale up? And again, there's a number of different answers to that question. It just sort of depends on what are their goals. Do they want to keep selling through the mail? Is that really all they want to do? Or do they think they want to open up a brick and mortar someday? And how do you scale to that? So it really just depends.
Okay, yeah, on long-term goals. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And for when we're thinking about like those first few clients, what would you say is like, how long does it take to get one of your first clients, and what would you say is like the initial cost of onboarding those first few clients?
Yeah, I try to get numbers on that. It's elusive to get a hard number and feel good about it being accurate. It is costly. I think that's the big take-home message, and it's costly enough. And this is borne out in other industries as well, but certainly ours, that it's more costly than retention, right? I think that's the big take-home message, is that you will spend more trying to keep getting new people on board than trying to keep them happy and keep them with you. And so that's a big part of what you should be looking at. How you find them is a whole other question, right? It's really we touched on that a little bit earlier. And actually Matthew's here now. If we want to throw that question back at him about trade shows and using IG, I think that would be a great time for him to chime in.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, finding customers is always kind of a tricky thing, isn't it? So I guess when we kind of started, having worked in the industry for quite a while, I already had a kind of broad network of baristas who I knew from previous businesses. So one of the things we kind of did was make sure we got some good coffee into their hands, because if you can get baristas excited about your product, it doesn't take long before they then, pass the message on to their friends and get people talking about it, and really kind of help spread the word, which is, the word of mouth advertising in this situation is valuable, really. I think the other kind of main way we've done it is approach people via Instagram, not in a particularly hard sell kind of way, but kind of started to build up conversation with people, and commenting on posts, liking posts, and then once you have that interaction going, it's like, hey, would you like to try some samples? Not specifically going after people as house customers initially, but sending samples as best accounts, etc. And then once you kind of develop that relationship, that's when it only takes kind of some of the bigger roasters, maybe a couple of mistakes, and you're kind of in the right place at the right time, and you can say, yeah, no problem, we can help you out. Your roasters let you down. It's really just kind of like being present, being there. And trade shows have been absolutely invaluable for us. Really, kind of having a presence, is very important, especially in an industry where there's a lot of competition. So, having a really good presence at trade shows, and it's really good for brand awareness and getting people to kind of know your face, know your name, see your branding, kind of find out what you're all about, really. And every time we do a trade show, we take on a lot of leads, a lot of potential wholesale leads. And I'd say around about 50% of those are converted into actual sales, which is pretty good, really.
Really good.
Yeah, I was going to ask, out of all the ways that you find new clients, what would you say is the quickest turnaround time from seeing a lead to a client? Is it a trade show maybe? Or
yeah, I think it probably is, actually. Usually we see orders happening, the week after a trade show, which is pretty amazing. So, I mean, hopefully that kind of speaks to the quality of the product, and, that people kind of fall with it. Or also, there's kind of incoming leads as well. Usually you turn around very quickly, unless it's a brand new operation, and they're the ones that take a bit of time and a lot of effort to kind of help, because often, especially since the pandemic, we've seen more and more new retail businesses pop up, and they require kind of usually a lot more help and assistance. As you were saying, looking for equipment, finding out what their training requirements are, often will help kind of design their workflow and their look at ways to make the workflow smoother in their cafe, and the design of the cafe. And as you said, help finding ancillary products, putting them in touch with local bakers, or good companies for tea, etc. That's definitely not something that we want to be involved in, but we're very, very happy to kind of suggest good providers for those kinds of business.
And we heard a little bit earlier that one of the tools that Scott and his team really utilized at the beginning was this amazing van. For you, Matthew, what has been some of the tools that have helped you succeed as a wholesaler?
That's a good question. I think time is probably the most important thing, allotting the right amount of time to actually make a real effort to forge relationships with people and visit people and find out what their needs are. Having a space that you can invite clients to that is going to kind of impress them, and being able to show them, kind of behind the scenes what you do. And also the ability to offer in-house training as well is really, really important. So we kind of initially built a training space, because we're not just a roastery, we also offer SEO training. So we ensured that we built, a really nice looking training space where people would feel reassured that they could come and get really high quality training from us as well. Yeah, I think that's kind of about it.
I think that's a great point. You can't disregard the idea that a training room is a tool, and even a sort of meeting area is a tool, and they're all helpful in getting your clients on board. And the costs, I want to add, which Matthew was already alluding to, includes that sort of follow-up. And so while your best sort of shortened time of getting somebody on board definitely is when they've reached out to you, there's still differences in where they are, where they're coming to you from. Are they just building an entire space out? That's going to be, certainly months, probably to many months, and you're still active, so you're still spending your time helping them, hopefully contractually, but maybe not. It can end any number of ways. So there's a little bit of like hopefulness when you're sort of starting out with a client, and you want to help them develop. But there's not necessarily a lot of guarantees. So those are actual costs that have to be considered into onboarding a client.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I feel like one of the tools that, like, obviously as a Cropster representative, that can help you save time is that we do offer some wholesale tools for folks, especially in the e-commerce world. We have a wholesale portal that folks can have individual storefronts, have unique pricing tiers, and then for our e-commerce product, we're able to import orders within seconds, and then you create your production list within minutes. I know for saving time as well as like not making mistakes, for folks that I talk to day in and day out, that's really helppful for their teams.
Can I just touching on that, actually, this has been an invaluable tool for us as well. I think, one of the things when setting up a wholesale business is designing the kind of flow from the customer's perspective and how you get orders. And having worked for businesses that have had all kinds of ordering systems from, email, telephone calls, keeping things on Post-it notes, for instance, spreadsheets, etc. We knew straight away that we wanted to make it as simple as possible, both for us and for the customer. So we implemented a wholesale portal straight away from day one, basically, so that all of the orders were coming in through the same funnel, and it was much easier to consolidate them and work out our production.
Yeah, let me do my shout out for Cropster too, because we've all been there. We've all we started with QuickBooks was our way of actually running the business, and it's not what it's designed for. Sure, you can invoice, but is it the right way? And so we've gone through all the permutations as well, and using Excel spreadsheets and all the fun things. And a lot of people, probably even who are online now here, are familiar with using Cropster for your coffee needs, for doing the roasting part. But we really needed a way to step back into the green storage and utilization, and then track that all the way through to the sales. And so that's been a huge help from the Cropster end. I mean, that's really tied it all together for us. And we already had an online Shopify. Incorporating that into the whole thing is really invaluable, and having one platform. I think that was the other thing, and not having to use multiple platforms to try to get the same job done.
That's great to hear. I hear that day in and day out, that it just saves time. And once you onboard the customers, like, even if you're still getting those text messages, you can go in on the back end and just enter it in, and it makes it so much cleaner rather than having all the little sticky notes around. So we're about 10 minutes out, and I want to talk about, you're starting all over. What are some of the challenges that you would overcome, and how would you, like, if you're starting from ground zero, what would you change? And that's for either of you, whoever has an idea.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest things that I would kind of do differently is to hire someone to take care of the wholesale side of the business from the outset. You know, we're, especially in a small startup business, you kind of have to wear many different hats and do many different things, some of which you know are definitely not within your skill set, but you have to learn quite quickly. So having someone who has the, you know, the unique skill set and the time to actually follow up on lots of leads and really kind of develop relationships is very difficult to get back to customers straight away when you're, you know, roasting, you know, busy during production or you know, any other kind of area with your training, etc. So having, you know, building up a team of people is absolutely vital. So, you know, we're really lucky now that we have my colleague Jamie, who's come on board, who's wholesale manager, who just deals with all of the wholesale inquiries. And we have 2 people working in production now, which is amazing. And then myself. It's allowed me to kind of take a step back and concentrate on really developing the business more and, you know, concentrating on other revenue streams like SCA courses. So yeah, people is definitely a very worthwhile investment, I think, from the outset. That's definitely something I would do if funds allowed.
I'm trying to rack my brain for something different, but honestly, it's the same story. And it's a matter of timing. You know, it's sort of like, sure, not everybody can just sort of hire everybody they need right away. But just being aware of the need and then figuring out how to onboard them for when it's you know, going to keep moving you forward. I'm the king of wearing too many hats, and it's just you know, you need to take those hats off as soon as you can. Because you might be doing okay, but every time I peel a layer of myself off and I hand it off to somebody, I can't imagine taking it back on. Like, I just don't know how I did it in the first place. And the real answer is I probably wasn't doing a great job. So, you know, finding the people who can actually do that for you and do it well can really help you focus on everything else. You know, next month I'll be in El Salvador like the whole month. So, you know, should I be in charge of sales? No, no one's going to be able to get a hold of me.
Yeah. So building out a team is one of the recommendations you all would suggest for folks. And just thinking about, you know, if we're building out the wholesale program, building a team, any other lessons learned that folks could maybe walk away from today being like, all right, this is the first one step, second step that I should implement today while building a wholesale program.
I'm hoping Matthew can start this off.
Yeah, since you started out as wholesale originally, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, touching the point I made earlier about designing the ordering process, basically, is, you know, one of the biggest things that hasn't been something we've concentrated on so much in other businesses, and it's something that's made our lives a million times easier. So just understanding, you know, how to make it as easy as possible from the customer's point of view is definitely one of the major lessons that we've learned. Yeah.
Once again, I can't get too different. I mean, what's great, and this is a plug again for Cropster, is there are more tools available now than ever. You don't have to start with a pen and paper in your garage. They're affordable, they're easy access and usable, and there's no reason not to incorporate them into your build early on, as opposed to waiting 20 years like, you know, we did. So you don't really need to push through the old Luddite version. You can just early adopter and do it as soon as it makes sense. Clearly, I'm not trying to push anybody into it, but you don't, you know, there's definitely more available, and I think that is a real bright lesson learned. And I think for someone who's been in it for a long time, I have to keep reminding myself that I can do things differently, that I can change them, and it'll be okay.
Exactly. Save yourself some time. Take off those hats. Just try to wear the ones that look good with your outfit for the day. Well, I really appreciate you both answering my questions today. I kind of want to open up to our attendees if they have any questions. I did see one question from Dave. He says to Scott and Matthew regarding the training rooms, do you offer courses to retail customers and use it as a way to engage your wholesale customers as well, both current and prospective? I guess maybe how do you use the training room as that tool?
Yeah, so I would say it's about 90% kind of retail customers who come for SEO training. We do also offer a big reduction to our wholesale customers, but we definitely have found that we have picked up several accounts just through offering SEO training. So, you know, people come, they enjoy the training, and, you know, they get a taste for our coffee, and yeah, and then they come back in a couple of months. So it's definitely another way to capture some interesting leads for sure.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, we originally built a training space for our wholesale clients specifically. I think that was what was in my mind of like, this is who I want to be as a support system for our clients. And so we made it part of, you know, who we were when you collaborated with us. But then there are all these other aspects that Matthew's mentioning where, you know, we realized, oh, customers just want to learn some of this stuff too. Let's find a way to do that, and would offer some, you know, some regularly scheduled workshops that they could attend for a low bar economically, because you don't want to scare people away, and try to find something that seems easy to them, but they feel good about it. They learn something, they get to enjoy some coffees. And then, just like Matthew said, you never know what's going to come of that. There's always potential from that to turn into something else because they had that experience. So I guess we backed into that a little bit, but certainly are utilizing it that way.
Perfect. And Dave was just saying he just completed making his training room, so now it's time to make it work.
Yeah, nice work, Dave.
I would say, so when you're thinking about it, Dave, think about who's doing those trainings. You know, they were me early on, and that's another hat that had to come off. And you know, the more you fill it out, the more you fill out your schedule, the more you're going to realize there needs to be a person who does that, especially if you do other things in your company.
Yeah, actually administrating the courses and booking people in, actually it requires a lot of time. So it's definitely worth thinking about, you know, maybe letting somebody else take care of that if you're the one dealing with the training.
Perfect. Well, I'll do one more ask if there's any other questions today. We're almost out of time. So I'll give you like 10 seconds to type one in. Oh, everyone's just saying thank you for answering questions today and being here. And I'd like to say the same. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate the responses you gave. And if anyone is interested in learning more about the Cropster Wholesale website that we offer, the Wholesale portal, or adding on e-commerce to their workflows, feel free to scan this using your phone, and you can schedule a demo with me and I will help you onboard it. Perfect. Otherwise, everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for coordinating.
Thank you.
Thank you.